Okay, so today is August the 26th, and we are learning about the cell theory. At this point, you should have already watched the video on the wacky history of the cell theory. What we're going to do now is we're going to set up an ISN entry so that we have some information about the cell theory to study from and also to recall information from. So in your ISN, I'm going to need you to turn to the next clean page. At the top of the page, I want you to write cell theory. Of course, I'm using a colored marker. That way, when I turn to this page, it clearly states what this information is about. I like to use different colors because it helps me when it's time for me to study, to keep it all organized, but that, of course, is your choice. In the modules for August the 26th, you're going to see some resources on a page, and they are different images. One looks like this. It has different scientists on it. Now, I have already cut these out, okay, of the page. I went ahead and I printed them, and like I said, I cut them out. If you do not have a printer or access to a printer at home, that's okay. We can still write the information that we are going to write into this foldable to paste on this page. So it's acceptable to write it if you don't have a printer. But if you do have a printer and you want to print this out, go ahead and print it, cut it out, and it's going to look like this. Okay, I'm going to put it off to the side. You will also find 3 different images that look like this. Again, I cut these out after I printed them. If you don't have a printer, again, you can draw these out on your ISN. Okay? So I'm going to put those to the side for right now. So when we watched the video, we learned about some different scientists that contributed to the cell theory. We learned what the cell theory was. We learned that there were 3 components to the cell theory, and those 3 parts, those 3 components, we definitely need to know those. So these are the 3 components that I'm going to put in my ISN. Okay, again, I like to color code, so when you see that I'm doing so, it's your choice if you would like to. Otherwise, you can use a black or blue pen or a pencil. So the first part of the cell theory said that all living things are made of 1 or more cells. So I'm going to write that down right here. All living things are made of 1 or more cells. Again, your ISN should look exactly like mine as you are creating that today. Okay? The second part of the cell theory, I'm going to go ahead and put number 2 right here, said that cells are the basic unit of life. Okay, underneath in parentheses, I'm going to write the word or words building blocks. Okay, because cells are the building blocks of life. Okay, so at this time you have the 2 parts of the cell theory. Adding to our ISN entry, we're going to write the 3rd part or the 3rd component of the cell theory. And that is that all cells come from pre-existing cells. Okay. Again, I use different colors because it's easier for me to see that there's 3 different parts of the cell theory. Now, we have the 3 parts written down. What we're going to do now is we're going to use these 3 different sets of images, and we're going to put them in our ISN, and we're going to label them either part 1, part 2, or part 3. Okay? So I'm going to go part 1 right here. I'm going to put number 1, and I'm going to look at these 3 different pictures, and I want to decide which one of these pictures is showing me that all living things are made of 1 or more cells. And when I'm looking at these 3 things here, I see levels of organization. Now this is what we learned about on Monday. So we will recall that in levels of organization, we start with that building block, the cell, okay? This image right here is showing cells that are splitting and a new cell is formed, right here. And then this picture right here shows us a zebra, which is an animal, it's living. It shows us a sunflower, which is a plant, and it's living. And then it shows us two single-celled organisms called an amoeba and a paramecium. So when I'm looking for the image for all living things are made of one or more cells, I think I'm going to pick this image right here because it shows us that all living things are made of one or more cells. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some paste. You can use tape if tape's easier for you, or liquid glue. And you're going to want to paste that down into your ISN. If you would like to, you are more than welcome to label the items: a zebra, a sunflower. Up here, this is an amoeba. And this last single-celled organism is called a paramecium. Many of you might remember it from 6th grade. Okay. All right, so let's paste down our next two images. So for the second part of the cell theory, we are looking for an image that shows you that cells are the basic unit of life, the building blocks. And again, what we learned on Monday from the levels of organization is that cell is the basic building block of life. It is, all cells are the basic unit of life. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that one. We're going to paste that down. So right now in our ISN entry, we have some good graphics that show what the three parts of the cell theory are telling us. And of course, number 3, we have one image left. All cells come from pre-existing cells. So a new cell doesn't just show up out of nowhere. We see in cell division that we have a cell, it splits, it divides, and now we have 2 cells. So now we have a new cell. So all cells come from pre-existing cells. Okay? And again, if you would like to use tape or glue, the glue stick to me is easy. It doesn't spread as much as the liquid glue, but use what you have to get those pasted down, okay? All right, so at this time in our ISN entry, we have cell theory, the 3 components, the 3 parts of the cell theory, and we have 3 different graphic images that shows what these cell theories are telling us. Now, lastly, we are going to create this foldable, and it has 5 different scientists that contributed to the cell theory. And we learned about these scientists in the video that we just watched, okay? So this is an actual foldable. At the bottom, it says title. On each of these lines, after you cut this out, you're gonna wanna fold on those lines. Okay, and it's an accordion foldable. So once you fold your line, you're gonna go back and fold it like a fan, like an accordion. And we're gonna keep folding till we get to the last portion. Okay, so what we have right now is we have an accordion file with the title at the bottom. And after we've completed this, we're going to go ahead and tape it in so that we can access the information, but then we can place it back into an accordion foldable and it will stay on our ISN page just like so, okay? But we need to fill out this foldable so that we have good information about the scientists and what they contributed to the cell theory. So opening up my foldable. Again, it says title on the side, so I need to fill that out first. I'm going to use a black marker, and I'm going to put cell theory scientist, because these are the scientists that contributed to form the cell theory. Okay? All right, so again, we learned about these scientists in the video, The Wacky History of the Cell Theory. And in sequential order, we learned about these scientists. The first scientist that we learned about, okay, is Robert Hooke. And I'm going to go ahead and write his name up at the top. Robert Hook. And I need you guys to copy what I am writing so that your foldable matches mine. Okay, so in this area right here, we have to give some information. What did Robert Hooke do? What did he contribute towards the cell theory? Okay, so what we learned about in the video is that he came up with the word cell. And in the video, he said that he noticed something. It was a new object. It didn't have a name. We now know it as a cell. And the reason why he gave it the name cell was because to him, it looked like the room in a monastery that a monk would live in. Okay, moving on. Next scientist that we are going to write about is Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Okay, this is a long name. Make sure you're copying it just like mine. Okay, Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Okay, what we learned about him in the video is that he made his own microscope. Okay, so Anton van Leeuwenhoek made his own microscope, so now he can see the cells in plants, cells in animals. Okay, so the next scientist that we learned about, his name is Matthias Schleiden. Okay, now Matthias Schleiden was a scientist, of course, and he was a botanist, which means he studied plants. And what he noticed and what he contributed to the cell theory is that he realized that all plants are made of cells. So go ahead and write that down. All plants are made of cells. That was his contribution to the cell theory. Okay, moving on. The next scientist that we learned about was Theodor Schwann. Okay, again, another scientist, and he discovered that all animals are made of cells. Okay, so at this time you should have a column for Robert Hooke. He's in the first column. Then Anton van Leeuwenhoek, Matthias Schleiden, and now Theodor Schwann. Moving on to the last scientist, and that would be Rudolf Virchow. Okay, Rudolf Virchow. Again, you are copying along with me at the same time. If you don't have this foldable, you could be writing this information down at the bottom of your ISN page for cell theory. Okay, Rudolf Virchow, as a scientist, he made observations that helped with the last part of the cell theory. Okay, so that all cells come from pre-existing cells. Okay, so now we have the entire foldable completed. Again, you could have written this on the bottom portion of your ISN. Just to review it quickly, Robert Hooke, he came up with the word cell. Anton van Leeuwenhoek made his own microscope. Matthias Schleiden is a botanist, and he said that all plants are made of cells. Theodor Schwann discovered that all animals are made of cells. And Rudolf Virchow had observations that helped with the last part of the cell theory. Again, these are all scientists of the cell theory. So since I made my foldable, I'm going to go ahead and fold it back up. Okay, just like so. And I'm going to put some paste at the bottom on the back side of where it says cell theory scientist. And I'm going to paste that into the bottom of my ISN. If I am using tape, I could take a piece of tape and I could tape that in as well. So at this time, we are finished with our entry, ISN entry on cell theory. Cell theory should be at the top. The first 3 parts of the cell theory should be next, 3 images that show the components of the cell theory, and then at the bottom, we have information about all the scientists that contributed to the cell theory. And that is the end of our entry in our ISN for cell theory.